Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly past the heavy oak doors of a medieval castle, just as the last scraps of supper are being scraped from wooden trenchers. You're still on your feet, even though your legs would love a chair, because night work is only just beginning. The great hall smells like roasted meat fading into cold smoke, beeswax, damp wool, and a hint of spilled ale that will never truly leave the rushes underfoot. Somewhere above you, a noble yawns.
Somewhere below you, a dog sighs and curls tighter. You're awake in that strange in-between hour when the castle exhales and hands its weight to people like you. And yes, gentle reality check, you probably wouldn't survive this long term. The hours stretch, the pay is thin, and sleep comes in crumbs. Still, you're here now, and there's work to do.
So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You stand near the end of the trestle tables as the household finishes eating. Supper in a medieval castle isn't one neat event, it's a cascade. The lord and lady eat first, then favored guests, then officers of the household, and finally, if timing and generosity allow, servants like you. Even now, after most mouths are full, there's motion everywhere. Plates pass hand to hand, knives are wiped on bread, bones pile up like small pale towers. A mainstream fact that settles in early: medieval castles didn't run on chaos, they ran on routine. Household manuals from later centuries describe evening procedures in almost soothing detail. Who clears what, who locks which door, who checks the fires. You're part of that machine, even if no one writes your name down. Tonight, your role is simple: help the hall transition from feast to silence.
You lift platters that feel heavier now that the excitement is gone. The room cools quickly once bodies drift away, and you can feel the stone floor stealing warmth through your shoes. Rushes, straw scattered on the floor, crackle softly as you walk, trapping crumbs and grease. They're changed only a few times a year, so yes, you're basically strolling across a medieval memory foam mattress of dinners past. Try not to think about that too much. Sleep is hard enough already.
You stack wooden trenchers near the door. Bread plates aren't washed, they're eaten, fed to dogs, or given to the poor. Historians still argue whether this system was primarily practical or symbolic. Was it about efficiency, charity, or quietly reminding everyone that nothing in this castle truly goes to waste? Whatever the reason, you know the rule: don't toss good bread unless you enjoy trouble.
A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind as you work. In some castles, leftovers were carefully accounted for because feeding extra mouths, soldiers, servants, animals, was a nightly calculation. Too much waste meant higher costs. Too little meant hungry people tomorrow. You're not just clearing plates, you're managing tomorrow's mood.
The great hall empties in layers. Benches scrape back, a few candles gutter and lean, their flames bending like tired dancers. You snuff one out with practiced fingers, pinching the wick just enough to avoid hot wax. Candle smoke curls upward, sharp and briefly bitter. Light is expensive here. Beeswax candles are a luxury. Tallow smells worse and burns dirtier. Either way, every flame matters.
You glance toward the high table. Someone important lingers, talking softly, laughing once. You wait. Timing is everything. Clear too early and you offend. Clear too late and you're blamed for clutter. This is the rhythm you learn without lessons.
A soft joke floats through your head to keep you awake. At least modern dinner parties don't involve carrying half a cow while pretending not to exist. You almost smile, then remember smiling at the wrong moment can look suspiciously like enjoying yourself.
When the final guests drift out,
the room feels suddenly huge. Sound behaves differently now. Your footsteps echo. A cough travels farther. You gather cups and jugs, noting which still smell of wine or watered ale. Another mainstream fact hums along with your work. Medieval people drank alcohol constantly, but it was often weak. Safer than water, they said. You don't argue. You just carry the jug.
You pause to brush crumbs from the table into a basket. These will feed pigs, chickens, or dogs by morning. The castle is an ecosystem. You are a small but vital creature in it, moving nutrients from one place to another. If that sounds grand, remember you're doing it with cold fingers and a sore back. Somewhere above, footsteps cross a gallery. Somewhere outside, a horn sounds faintly from the gate as guards change. Night is officially taking over. You feel it in your shoulders. The work ahead stretches long, but this first task, closing the day, has its own quiet satisfaction. As you finish, you straighten a bench, line it with the table, and smooth a cloth that will be stained again tomorrow. You think briefly about how little changes here. Historians still argue whether servants found comfort or despair in that sameness. Did repetition make life bearable, or did it grind people down? Standing here, you suspect the answer depends on the night. One last candle flickers near the dais. You leave it burning for now. The hall shouldn't go dark all at once. Sudden darkness invites stumbles, whispers, and things better left unseen. You take a breath, steady, slow. The castle has settled into its nighttime voice, lower and calmer. Your shift is far from over, but the day, at least, is done. You step toward the door, arms full, moving on to the next quiet task as the echoes of supper finally fade. You carry the last of the platters away, and almost immediately your attention shifts to the quiet danger humming through the castle. Fire. Night doesn't mean warmth takes care of itself. If anything, this is when mistakes happen. You step into the side chambers and corridors with a small iron tool in hand, listening to the soft roar of hearths settling after supper. Flames are comfort, status, and constant threat, all at once. You crouch by the first hearth, feeling the heat lick your face. The logs have burned down to glowing embers, orange and steady. Your job isn't to kill the fire entirely, no one wants to wake up shivering, but to bank it. You rake the embers inward, pile ash over the top, and slow the burn. It's like tucking a child into bed, if the child could burn the entire castle down if you mess it up. No pressure. A mainstream historical fact slips neatly into your movements. Medieval castles were terrifyingly flammable. Despite all that stone, interiors were packed with timber beams, wooden floors, tapestries, straw mattresses, and rush-covered ground. Fires were one of the leading causes of castle destruction, and most households had strict nighttime rules about hearths. You don't need a rule book to tell you this. You've seen what happens when someone forgets. You move from room to room, repeating the same careful ritual. In wealthier castles, certain chambers, like the Lord's Solar, might keep a stronger fire overnight. Elsewhere, embers are smothered until they glow faintly, like watchful eyes in the dark. You test the air with your hand, feeling for stray sparks. Your fingers smell like ash, a scent that never fully washes out. Somewhere behind you, another servant coughs. You both freeze for a moment, listening. Nothing follows. You exchange a look that says, "Yes, we're still alive," and keep working. Medieval teamwork at its finest. Minimal words, maximum shared anxiety. A quirky tidbit worms its way into your thoughts as you work. In some regions, people believed fire had a kind of memory. Let it go out completely, and it might refuse to relight properly the next day. That's why embers were so precious. New fire wasn't easy to make. You needed flint, steel, and patience. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were superstition layered onto practicality, or whether the difficulty of fire starting genuinely shaped spiritual ideas about flame. Either way, you don't let the hearth die. You're not tempting fate tonight.
You check the iron firebacks, making sure they're positioned correctly to reflect heat inward. In colder seasons, this job matters even more. A poorly banked fire means frozen pipes. Well, frozen everything, really, and a miserable morning for everyone. You imagine the Lord's displeasure if he wakes to a cold chamber. That image alone could keep a fire burning through a blizzard.
You move on, heart rate steady, steps slow. Night work teaches patience. Rush and you miss something. Miss something and you don't just get scolded, you get blamed. You pause at a hearth near a drafty corridor, noticing the wind teasing the embers. You adjust the ash, muttering under your breath like the fire can hear you. Maybe it can. Best not to offend it. Here comes your first gentle joke of the night. You realize modern central heating has robbed humanity of the character-building experience of negotiating with fire at midnight. Truly tragic.
You check metal buckets placed nearby, filled with water or sand, just in case. This is another mainstream fact woven into routine. Castles often kept firefighting supplies ready, even if firefighting mostly meant yelling and throwing whatever liquid was closest. You imagine the chaos if an alarm rang now, bare feet slapping stone, people shouting half-awake prayers. The thought makes you extra careful. In a storage room, you find a small brazier, still glowing brighter than it should. Someone forgot this one. Your shoulders tense as you lower the lid, cutting off oxygen. The glow dims reluctantly. You wait a beat longer than necessary, just to be sure. When it finally behaves, you exhale. Crisis quietly avoided. These moments never make it into chronicles, but they're the reason the castle still stands. As you work, you become aware of the sounds that replace daytime noise. The pop of cooling wood, the distant clank of armor as guards settle in, wind sighing through arrow slits, your own breathing. It's almost soothing, if you ignore the ever-present risk of accidental inferno.
A second light joke drifts in. You think about how future generations will romanticize castle life, while you're over here playing medieval fire marshal in your socks. History is funny like that. You move toward the kitchen hearths, which are the most dangerous of all. These fires burn hotter, longer, and with less sentimentality. You scrape grease away from the edges, knowing how easily it can flare. The smell is sharp, old fat mixed with smoke. Your eyes sting a little, but you don't rush. This is the heart of the castle's heat, and its biggest liability.
Historians still argue whether kitchen servants had higher injury rates than other household staff, or whether the danger was simply more visible. Standing here, bent over glowing coals, you'd vote for yes, absolutely more dangerous, but no one is taking surveys tonight. When you're satisfied, you straighten slowly, back protesting. You roll your shoulders, feeling the ache settle in. There's pride here, quiet and private. You've done something necessary. The castle is safer now because of you, even if no one says thank you. Before leaving, you glance once more at the embers, now dull and calm. They'll last until morning, just as planned. You brush ash from your hands onto your apron and step away, careful not to stir the air too much. As you head down the corridor toward your next duty, the warmth fades behind you, replaced by cool stone and the sense that the night is fully awake now. Fires are tamed for the moment. You've bought the castle a few more hours of peace. And for tonight, that's enough.
With the fires banked and behaving themselves, your next responsibility glows faintly in the shadows. Light, or rather, the careful reduction of it. You move along the corridors with a small taper in hand, its flames steady and obedient, unlike the larger candles you're about to deal with. The castle doesn't sleep in total darkness, but it definitely doesn't waste illumination on empty rooms either.
You pause at a wall sconce and look at the candle there. Thick, expensive, slowly melting into elegant drips that harden like frozen tears. Beeswax,
judging by the clean smell. Someone important insisted on that. You pinch the wick, snuffing it out with a practiced motion, and a curl of smoke rises, thin and blue. The darkness deepens, but not completely. Moonlight slips in through narrow windows, just enough to outline stone and shadow.
A mainstream historical fact settles in as you work. Artificial light in the medieval world was a luxury tightly controlled by the household. Candles weren't just light, they were wealth you could watch disappear minute by minute. Household accounts from later medieval estates list candles alongside meat and grain, counted, measured, and guarded. Tonight, you are the accountant, balancing brightness against necessity.
You move quietly because light carries sound. Every snuff, every step echoes a little louder in the hush. You've learned to breathe slowly, to place your feet flat, to avoid brushing against tapestries that could sway and give you away. It's not that you're sneaking, more that the castle prefers discretion at night.
You relight a rushlight in a corner where guards might pass later. Rushlights are humble things, dried reeds dipped in animal fat, burning unevenly and smelling faintly like old kitchens. They're cheaper than candles, and just bright enough to stop someone from walking straight into a wall. You adjust it so it leans safely away from fabric. Fire and light are always flirting with disaster here.
A quirky tidbit flickers through your mind as you work. In some castles, the exact placement of lights at night followed tradition bordering on ritual. Certain corridors were always dimmed, others always left glowing, not because of logic, but because it's how it's always been done. Historians still argue whether these patterns were about security, superstition, or simply habit hardened into law. You don't debate it. You follow the pattern. Patterns keep you employed. You step into a stairwell, your shadow stretching and shrinking as the flame wobbles. Stairs are treacherous even in daylight. At night, they're practically booby traps. You leave a candle burning halfway down, knowing it will be replaced before dawn. It's a small kindness to whoever climbs these steps half awake later, possibly you. Here's your first light joke of the section. You realize medieval interior design is basically moody ambiance taken way too seriously. Very aesthetic, very unsafe.
You continue on, extinguishing candles in guest chambers now empty. The air is cooler here, tinged with perfume and the lingering warmth of bodies that have moved on to softer beds. You pinch, wait for the ember to die, and move to the next. Each extinguished flame feels like closing an eye. The castle is blinking itself to sleep.
You keep track mentally because someone will ask later, how many candles were left burning? Where? You don't write it down, but the knowledge sticks. Memory is another form of labor. A missed candle means questions in the morning, and questions mean explanations, and explanations are exhausting.
A second gentle joke floats by to keep your mind from wandering too far into fatigue. You think about how people today complain when their phone battery drops to 20%, while you're over here rationing light like it's the end of the world. Perspective is a funny thing.
You pause at a window slit and peer outside. The courtyard below is silvered with moonlight. Torches at the gate burn steadily, tended by someone else. Your responsibility is the interior, the quiet bones of the place. You turn back inside, letting the darkness reclaim the view.
In the chapel, you tread especially carefully. Candles here are often left burning longer, partly out of reverence and partly out of fear. Extinguishing a devotional candle feels like a decision, not a task. You wait, listening, then gently snuff only those meant to go. The remaining flames flicker softly, casting long shadows of carved saints who look vaguely disappointed in you no matter what you do.
A mainstream fact hums in the background. Medieval people genuinely feared darkness, not metaphorically, practically. Darkness meant injury, crime, spirits, and the unknown. Light wasn't just convenience,
It was protection. That's why your job isn't simply to put everything out. It's to leave enough glow that the night doesn't feel hostile. Historians still argue whether castles were brighter at night than we imagine, or darker. Written sources suggest both, depending on wealth, season, and paranoia. Standing here, you suspect the truth lives somewhere in between. Pockets of light floating in a sea of shadow.
You move through a narrow passage behind the walls, where servants travel unseen. Here, you leave one small flame burning the entire night. No one talks about why. It's just understood. Maybe it's for safety. Maybe it's for comfort. Maybe someone long ago got lost in the dark and decided never again.
Your shoulders droop a little as the repetition sets in. Snuff. Step. Check. Adjust. Snuff again. The rhythm is almost hypnotic, and you have to be careful not to drift. Falling asleep while holding a candle is not a great career move. Your third light joke surfaces lazily. You consider how this job would look on a resume. Professional darkness curator. Very niche. Very medieval.
At last, you reach the end of your circuit. The castle feels different now. Quieter. Softer. As if wrapped in a dim blanket. You look back down the corridor, noting the faint points of light you've intentionally left behind. Each one has a purpose. Each one is a promise that the night is being watched.
You extinguish your own taper last, letting your eyes adjust. The darkness isn't total. It never is. It breathes around you, familiar and oddly reassuring. You turn, guided by memory and muscle, and head toward your next duty. The light is handled. The shadows are behaving. And the night, for now, is under control. With the lights dimmed to their proper places, you drift back toward the heart of the castle, where supper has officially ended, but its evidence still lingers everywhere. The great hall waits for you again, quieter now, smelling less like food and more like cooling stone and smoke. This is the unglamorous part, the slow accounting of what was eaten, what remains, and what absolutely cannot be left out overnight unless you enjoy attracting rats the size of confident cats. You begin at the tables, lifting the last wooden trenchers and bowls. Some are scraped clean, others still hold crumbs and grease smears that catch the faint candlelight. You tilt them carefully into a basket, separating what's still useful from what's gone truly unredeemable. This isn't just tidying, it's inventory management, medieval style.
A mainstream historical fact settles into your hands as you work. Medieval castles were intensely conscious of food waste. Feeding a large household required careful planning, and leftovers weren't an afterthought. They were part of the system. Bones went to broths, scraps to animals, stale bread to servants or charity. You're one of the invisible people making sure tomorrow's meals are possible.
You gather crusts of bread, some hard enough to knock politely on a door. These will be soaked later or handed out. Nothing edible is casually thrown away. You pause over a piece that's half bitten and sigh. Technically usable. Technically. You add it to the pile anyway. Hunger tomorrow is worse than mild disgust tonight. The sound of scraping wood is loud in the quiet hall, so you slow your movements, making each action deliberate. You don't want to wake anyone important. You also don't want to attract the attention of someone higher ranking who might decide you're doing it wrong, despite having never done it themselves.
A quirky tidbit surfaces as you carry a basket toward the side door. In some castles, servants were allowed or expected to eat leftovers late at night, often standing in kitchens or corridors. There was no formal dinner for you, just opportunity. Historians still argue whether this was a perk or a quiet form of control. Eat when you can, where you can, and don't ask for more. You chew on that thought as much as the bread itself.
You pass the kitchen, where the fires you banked earlier glow faintly. Here, the work becomes more precise.
You sort meat scraps from vegetable peelings, stacking bones neatly. Bones matter. They'll flavor soups, thicken stews, or be boiled until they surrender every last bit of value. You treat them with surprising respect, laying them out carefully like pieces on a board. Here comes your first light joke of the section. You realize medieval recycling puts modern compost bins to shame. Zero waste, maximum effort, absolutely no smug labels.
You wipe down tables with rough cloths, dampen just enough to lift grease without spreading it. The cloth smells permanently of old meals and smoke. You don't mind. Familiar smells mean you're doing something right. You rinse it in a bucket, wring it out, and keep going. Some food you set aside deliberately. This portion will go to the dogs later. They're working animals, guards and fur coats, and they expect their cut. Miss it, and they'll remind you tomorrow by ignoring commands or stealing something important. You've learned to respect that system too.
A second mainstream fact hums quietly. Many castles kept detailed household rolls tracking food distribution. Who got what, when. Even servants' portions were sometimes noted, especially in large estates. You're not writing anything down, but you know someone will notice if the numbers don't feel right. Food has a way of being remembered. You carry a basket out toward the courtyard, where night air cools your face instantly. The stars feel brighter away from the hall's lingering smoke. You dump peelings and truly spoiled scraps into designated bins, careful not to spill. Spills invite vermin. Vermin invite lectures.
As you head back inside, you hear soft footsteps behind you. Another servant nods, exchanging a look that says, yes, still awake, still going. No words are needed. Shared exhaustion is its own language. Back in the hall, you sweep slowly, gathering crumbs from between the rushes. This is tedious work, but important. Leave too much, and by morning, the floor will feel alive. You've seen it. No one wants that. You hum quietly to yourself. Not a tune exactly. More like a sound to keep your mind from drifting.
Historians still argue whether rush-covered floors were genuinely comfortable or simply practical. Standing here, broom in hand, you decide they're mostly just very forgiving about mess. Comfort is debatable. Your second light joke floats up as you straighten. You imagine explaining this system to someone from the future. Yes, the floor is straw. Yes, we eat over it. No, we're not okay. When the hall is finally cleared, it looks almost serene. Empty tables, clean benches, a faint sheen where grease once lived. You pause for a moment, hands on your hips, and let yourself appreciate the transformation. It won't last long. Nothing here does.
You carry the last basket of edible leftovers toward the servants' area, setting it aside for later distribution. Someone else will manage it from here. Or maybe you will, depending on how the night unfolds. Tasks blend together after a while. Your stomach growls softly, reminding you that you haven't eaten properly yet. Maybe later. Maybe never. You swallow the thought and wipe your hands on your apron. As you leave the hall behind, it feels lighter somehow, like it's been exhaled. The evidence of human noise and appetite has been erased, at least for a few hours. You've done your part in that quiet magic.
You step into the corridor, already thinking about the next duty waiting in the dark. The night keeps moving. So do you.
With the hall quiet and cleared, your path turns towards something heavier than baskets or brooms. Security. The castle doesn't simply drift into sleep. It has to be sealed, persuaded, and reminded that night has rules. You reach for a ring of keys that feels warm from being held too long, each one shaped slightly differently, each with a weight your hand knows by memory. You start with the inner doors, thick oak, banded with iron, scarred by generations of use. You pull one closed, listening to the low, final thud as it meets the frame. Then the bolt, solid wood sliding into stone. The sound is deep and reassuring, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. You check it twice. Everyone checks it twice. It's just how it's done.
A mainstream historical fact settles in as you move. Medieval castles relied on layered security, not one lock, but many. Doors within doors, bars behind bolts. Even inside the walls, access was controlled carefully at night. Castles weren't just defending against armies, they were managing the constant risk of theft, fire, and the occasional drunk noble wandering where they shouldn't.
You move down a corridor, locking side chambers no one should enter until morning. Some doors resist, swollen from damp. You lean your shoulder into one, coaxing it closed with a quiet grunt. The iron latch scrapes and settles. Satisfying. Your arms ache, but the ache feels purposeful. Here comes your first light joke of the section. You realize medieval security is basically trust issues, but make it architectural.
You approach a narrow door that leads to storage rooms. This one gets an extra bar. Food, tools, and supplies live here, and temptation doesn't sleep just because it's dark. You slide the bar into place, feeling the grooves worn smooth by centuries of hands just like yours. This door has been locked thousands of times. You're just the latest link in a very tired chain. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind as you work. In some castles, keys themselves were status symbols. The more keys you carried, the more trusted, or burdened, you were. There were even official titles tied to keys, like Chamberlain. You glance at your modest ring and feel oddly proud. Not noble, but necessary. You make your way toward the main entrances, where the doors are taller, heavier, and far more serious about their job. 2 people help here when possible, but tonight you manage with practiced leverage. The doors swing shut with a groan that echoes up into the rafters. You wince, waiting to see if anyone stirs. Nothing. Good. You slide thick iron bolts into place, then secure them with locks that require real effort. The key turns slowly, metal on metal, reluctant but obedient. You test the door with a push. Solid. The outside world is now politely but firmly excluded.
Historians still argue whether most medieval break-ins happened at night or during busy daytime hours. Standing here, you suspect night feels more dangerous simply because you're tired. Everything feels sharper, more threatening when your body wants sleep. You move along the walls, checking postern doors, small, hidden exits used for errands or emergencies. These are especially important. Forget one, and you'll hear about it, possibly forever. You crouch to secure a low latch, knees protesting. The stone is cold, even through your clothes. Your second gentle joke floats by as you straighten. You think about how fitness influencers would love this routine. Functional strength, zero equipment, terrible lighting. You pause at a window shutter, pulling it closed and fastening it from inside. Shutters matter more than glass here. Glass is rare, expensive, and fragile. Wood is reliable. You test the fastening, then move on, leaving only thin slivers of night peeking through. Outside, the guards call softly to one another as they take their positions. You recognize voices, patterns. They'll handle the walls and towers. You handle the inside. It's an unspoken agreement that keeps the whole place breathing. A mainstream fact hums quietly. Many castles locked themselves in stages throughout the evening. Early closures for some areas, final lockdown closer to midnight. You're part of that final sweep, the last human hands most of these doors will feel until dawn. You reach the stair leading down to the lower levels. This gate gets special attention. You close it carefully, listening for the echo. Bolt, bar, check. You imagine someone centuries from now trying to open it and feeling that same resistance. The continuity is oddly comforting. Historians still argue whether servants felt safer or more trapped once the castle was locked for the night. On one hand, nothing gets in. On the other, nothing gets out.
You roll that thought around as you secure the final latch. Your third light joke surfaces lazily. You consider how this place is essentially a medieval panic room, except everyone's inside, whether they want to be or not.
At last, the keys feel lighter. Fewer doors left. You return them to your belt, where they knock softly against your hip with each step. The castle is sealed now, like a chest with its lid closed. You stand for a moment in the corridor, listening. The sounds have changed. Fewer echoes. A sense of enclosure settles in. This is the night state of the castle, achieved through your quiet labor.
You take a breath, slow and deep, and let your shoulders drop. One more major duty done. Many smaller ones still waiting, of course. There always are. You turn away from the locked doors and head deeper into the castle's sleeping body, ready for whatever the dark asks of you next.
With the doors sealed and the castle tucked in like a very large, very expensive child, your attention turns outward and upward to the night watch. You're not always the one pacing the walls, but tonight you're involved, even if only briefly. Security doesn't end at locked doors. It stretches into the dark, along battlements and towers, where silhouettes move against the stars. You climb a narrow stair that coils tightly, your hand sliding along the cold stone wall for balance. The air changes as you rise. Speech is economical at this hour. Everything important has already been said earlier. A mainstream historical fact settles into your awareness. Medieval castles maintained night watches almost without exception. Guards worked in shifts, often rotating every few hours to stay alert. Their job wasn't just to spot enemies, it was to watch for fires, signal changes, and make sure the castle stayed quiet, in the particular way quiet is supposed to sound. You step aside as the watch changes. One man hands off a spear, another takes it, fingers brushing briefly. There's a rhythm to it, like a ceremony stripped of drama by repetition. Someone yawns and immediately looks embarrassed. You pretend not to notice. Everyone here is tired. That's the unifying feature of nighttime work. You check a lantern, adjusting the shutter so the light points inward rather than out. Too much glow on the walls makes an easy target. Too little, and someone trips. Balance again. Everything tonight is about balance. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind as you listen to the guards murmur softly. In some castles, watchmen were required to sing or call out the hours to prove they were awake. It wasn't for poetry, it was accountability. Historians still argue whether these calls were primarily practical or psychological, a way to comfort sleepers by reminding them someone was alert. Standing here, you think it's probably both. A human voice in the dark is reassuring, even when it's off-key. You lean on the parapet for a moment, looking out over the landscape. Fields stretch away, pale under moonlight. Nothing moves. That's good. Still, you know better than to trust stillness. The night has a way of holding surprises until the last possible second. Here comes your first light joke of the section. You think about how modern security cameras never complain about the cold. Truly spoiled technology. A guard gestures toward the tower stairs. Your part is simple tonight. Make a round, confirm everyone is awake, everything's normal. You descend, then climb again, repeating the pattern. Stone steps count themselves under your breath. You know exactly how many there are, even half asleep. At each post, you pause. A nod, a quiet word. All well. The phrase carries more weight than it looks. All well means no fire, no noise, no unexpected guests, no sudden emergencies. It's a small miracle, repeated hourly. A second mainstream fact hums in your chest. Many medieval guards were locals or long-term household men, not faceless soldiers. They knew the land, the people, the rhythms. Watching wasn't just duty, it was familiarity weaponized against surprise. You pause near a crenel and listen. Wind slides past the stone, making a low, constant sound. Somewhere far off, an owl calls.
You tilt your head, distinguishing animal noise from human. You've learned to tell the difference. Everyone here has.
Historians still argue how often castles were actually attacked at night versus how often people simply feared it. The watch exists as much for peace of mind as for defense. You feel that now. Standing here, knowing someone is awake, makes the dark feel thinner. Your second gentle joke wanders through. You imagine explaining this job to someone who thinks medieval life was all banquets and bravery. Mostly it's just checking that nothing's on fire. Again. You move along the wall walk, boots quiet on stone. A guard adjusts his cloak, shivering slightly. You say nothing, but you notice. Someone will bring him a thicker one later. Or not. Supplies are finite, and comfort is relative. You check a signal horn mounted on the wall, running your fingers over its smooth curve. It hasn't been used in months, maybe years. Still, it's ready. That's the point. Preparedness lives in objects as much as people. A quirky detail slips into your thoughts. In some regions, night watches included superstitious practices. Charms hung on walls, whispered prayers, even specific walking patterns believed to ward off bad luck. Historians still argue whether these habits were officially sanctioned or quietly tolerated. You glance at a small carving near the tower door and wonder how many eyes have passed over it, hoping. Your third light joke surfaces lazily. You realize the medieval version of "nothing happened on my shift" is actually a compliment. After your circuit, you return to the stair and ascend. The air grows warmer, heavier, more familiar. Stone gives way to corridors. Echoes soften. You leave the watch to their endless pacing. They'll trade places again soon. The night turns, whether you watch it or not. Before fully stepping away, you pause and listen one last time. The castle sounds steady. No alarms, no raised voices, just the low, continuous breath of a place at rest.
You nod to yourself. Not in pride exactly, but in acknowledgement. The watch is set. The walls are awake, even if most people inside are not. As you move on, the sense of being enclosed returns, gentle and firm. The outside world is held at a distance now by stone, wood, iron, and tired humans doing their best. You head back into the depths of the castle, knowing the night still has hours left to fill and tasks ready to meet you in the quiet.
You finally drift away from the busier corridors and staircases and descend, sometimes literally, into the quieter, lower parts of the castle. This is where you sleep, if sleep is the right word. The air changes as you move below stairs. It's warmer in some corners, stale in others, and always layered with smells. Old straw, damp wool, faint smoke that never quite leaves your clothes. You duck your head through a low doorway because medieval castles were clearly designed by people who hated tall servants, and step into the shared sleeping space.
There is no privacy here. None. You lie down among others who are just as tired as you are, bodies arranged like spoons in a drawer. Men, women, older children, all depending on the household, sleep close together for warmth and convenience. Beds are rare. If you're lucky, there's a wooden platform stuffed with straw or chaff. If you're less lucky, you're on the floor with a thin pallet and a blanket that smells like every season it has ever survived.
Historians agree that most medieval servants slept communally, often fully dressed, because undressing would have been both impractical and dangerously cold. You keep your clothes on, boots nearby, because night isn't truly yours. You might be woken at any moment. A bell, a shout, a noble's whim. The castle never fully sleeps, and neither do you. This is one of those quiet realities you probably won't survive with modern expectations intact. No mattress, no door to close, and absolutely no concept of personal space. As you settle in, there's a low murmur of voices. Complaints drift through the dark. Someone's back hurts. Someone else is muttering about tomorrow's work. A third is already snoring, loudly and without shame.
You learn quickly that complaining is part of bonding. It's the medieval equivalent of group therapy, except colder and with more fleas. Yes, fleas. They're here, whether you acknowledge them or not. Cats help, a little. Smoke helps, a little. Nothing solves the problem completely.
A mainstream historical fact quietly settles in with you. Medieval castles were not designed for comfort, even for the people who owned them. For servants, comfort was a luxury layered far below survival. Shared sleeping spaces reduced fire risk, conserved heat, and made it easier to summon workers quickly. Efficiency mattered more than rest. You roll onto your side, listening to the breathing around you, and realize that the castle's heartbeat is loudest at night.
Somewhere nearby, a candle is stubbed out. Darkness deepens. Rushlights, thin strips of dried plant pith soaked in fat, are sometimes left glowing low, but most of the time, the room is nearly black. You learn to navigate this darkness by memory. 3 steps to the wall, 1 step to the post. Don't trip over that bucket. Again.
There's a quirky detail historians love to mention. Servants often slept head to foot rather than side by side to save space and reduce the spread of lice. Whether this actually worked is questionable. Historians still argue whether lice were simply an unavoidable fact of medieval life, or if certain castles managed better hygiene than others through frequent straw changes and smoke fumigation. Either way, you scratch once, then stop, because scratching just makes it worse.
Someone whispers a joke about the Lord's ridiculous hat earlier that day. A soft wave of suppressed laughter passes through the room. This is one of your 3 permitted jokes of the night, and it's gentle enough not to wake anyone important. Humor here is quiet, observational, and usually aimed upward. You smile into the dark because laughter feels warmer than blankets.
You drift, but sleep is shallow. The floor creaks above you as guards change shifts. Wind hums through arrow slits, making a low, almost soothing whistle. For a moment, if you squint your imagination just right, it's almost like white noise. Almost like the fan you were told to turn on earlier. Almost comforting.
You're also sharing space with hierarchy. Even in sleep, rank matters. Senior servants might claim better spots, closer to residual heat, farther from drafts. Newer or lower status workers are nearer the door, the cold, or the risk of being stepped on in the dark. You accept your place without much thought. Fighting it would only make tomorrow worse.
A fringe tidbit slips into your half-dreaming mind. In some castles, servants were deliberately housed near kitchens or storerooms so they could respond instantly to problems like rats, fires, or spills. This means your sleep is punctuated by sudden wake-ups to chase something, carry something, or clean something you didn't make dirty. Medieval multitasking never really stops.
Your body aches now that you're still. Shoulders stiff from carrying. Hands rough from work. You shift, trying to find a position that doesn't press a bruise into the floor. Someone nearby sighs deeply, the sound of someone already slipping into deeper rest. You envy them, just a little.
Time stretches. Bells are silent for now. No alarms, no shouting. Just the quiet life of a castle, breathing in the dark. You start counting breaths, yours and others, letting the rhythm slow you. This is as close as you get to meditation. No monks required.
Historians still argue whether medieval people slept in one long stretch or in 2 segmented sleeps with a waking period in between. Lying here, half asleep, half alert, you suspect the answer is both, depending on how much work they had. Your own rest comes in fragments: a dream, a sound, a shift, another dream. Somewhere above, a noble turns over in a feather bed, unaware of the quiet human pile making that comfort possible. That thought flickers through your mind, not bitter, just factual. This is the system. You are part of it.
Tomorrow, you'll rise before dawn and do it again. For now, though, the room stays quiet. The jokes fade. Breathing evens out. You let your eyes close fully, trusting that if the castle needs you, it will make itself known, loudly. Until then, you rest as best you can, wrapped in shared exhaustion, shared warmth, and the strange, steady calm of being exactly where you're expected to be.
You don't wake so much as drift upward, pulled from shallow sleep by a sound that doesn't belong to dreams. It's distant at first, metal on stone, a muffled call, then closer, sharper. Night duty doesn't announce itself politely. You sit up before you're fully awake, muscles already preparing, because your body has learned faster than your thoughts. Someone needs something.
You rise quietly, careful not to step on anyone. This takes skill. You memorize the arrangement of bodies the way other people memorize maps. One misstep, and you'll hear about it in the morning. You grab your boots, tug them on without lacing properly, and ease out into the corridor, where the air is colder and smells faintly of old smoke. A guard stands there, helmet under his arm, face tired but alert. He nods once. No explanations. You don't need one. The unspoken rule of the castle at night is simple. If you're awake, you're useful.
You follow him toward a stairwell lit by a single flickering torch. Shadows stretch and wobble along the walls, making the stone carvings look briefly alive. You've seen them do this 100 times, and still, your imagination insists on trying to fill in movement. You ignore it. Medieval castles are excellent places to invent ghosts if you let yourself. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you. Castles required round-the-clock staffing. Even at night, servants were expected to respond to alarms, messengers, sick nobles, restless children, or practical problems like leaks, fires, or animals where animals should not be. Night service wasn't an exception. It was baked into the job.
Tonight's problem turns out to be water. A barrel has tipped in a lower passage, soaking straw and threatening to turn stone slick. Water plus stone plus darkness equals broken bones. You fetch rags and help mop, working by torchlight that turns every movement into a slow dance of shadows. The stone is cold through the cloth. Your hands move automatically. There's a quiet rhythm to this kind of work. Wipe, step, ring, wipe again. No one speaks much. Voices feel too loud at this hour, like shouting in a church. The guard watches the passage, occasionally glancing toward the walls, as if the water might try something again.
A quirky tidbit drifts in as you work. Some castles kept night servants specifically trained to deal with fires, flooding, or structural issues, because candle flames and open hearths made nighttime disasters common. Buckets were kept ready, sand stored nearby, ladders leaned just so. Medieval safety protocols existed. They were just very manual and very unforgiving. Your first light joke of the section floats through your mind as you mop. You think how this is basically medieval customer support, except the customers are stone walls and the complaints are gravity-based. Once the passage is safe, you're not dismissed, you're redirected. Another servant needs help carrying something heavy to a solar above. You climb stairs that spiral just tight enough to make your shoulders brush the wall, your breathing loud in your own ears. The castle at night amplifies everything. Footsteps, breaths, even thoughts. At the top, you deliver the bundle. Extra blankets, as it turns out. Someone important is cold. Someone always is. You don't see them. You don't need to. The blankets disappear through a doorway, and a quiet good is all the thanks you get. It's enough.
Historians still argue whether night work was resented or simply accepted as part of medieval life. Standing here, half awake, half functioning, you suspect resentment requires energy you don't have. Acceptance is easier. Acceptance lets you keep moving. On your way back, you pause near a narrow window slit. Outside, the world is black and silver,
moonlight catching on frost or dew. The castle walls hold firm. For a moment you feel suspended between inside and out, between sleep and waking. It's oddly peaceful. Then a bell rings. Not loud, not urgent, just enough to pull you back. You turn and head toward the sound, already guessing the cause. Bells at night often mean illness, a noble child with a fever, an elderly relative who can't sleep. You fetch water, herbs, maybe a chamber pot. The tasks blur together, but your hands know what to do. Here comes your second gentle joke. You think about how on-call, medieval style, means you never actually leave work. You just lie down horizontally between tasks.
The room you enter is warm, overly so. A small fire glows low. You move quietly, set down what you're carrying, adjust something as directed. The person in the bed barely notices you. That's the goal. Night servants are meant to be invisible, like helpful shadows. A fringe detail slips in. In some households, servants believed being seen too much at night brought bad luck, or worse, suspicion. Better to move softly, efficiently, and vanish again before anyone can form an opinion.
When you're finally released, the castle feels different, quieter now, deeper into the night. You move through it with a familiarity that borders on intimacy. You know which stones creak, which doors complain, which corners hold cold air like a grudge. You check one more torch, making sure it won't gutter out too soon. Fire is comfort, but it's also danger. Historians still argue how often nighttime fires destroyed castles from the inside rather than enemy action, enough that you never ignore a flame. Your third light joke arrives as you head back downstairs. You consider how boring history leaves out just how much of the past was people quietly fixing small problems while very tired.
At last, you slip back into the sleeping space. It takes a moment to reorient, to find your place again. You ease down, boots off this time, trusting that you'll hear if you're needed. Your body sinks into the straw with a sigh you don't bother to hide. Sleep comes faster now, heavier. You've earned it, at least for a little while. The castle continues its low hum around you, guards pacing, wind brushing stone, distant sounds softened by walls and time. You let yourself drift, knowing the night isn't done with you yet, but also knowing that for now, the darkness is holding steady.
You think you're finally sinking back into a deeper sleep when a whisper cuts through the dark like a thread pulled tight. It's your name, or close enough. You open one eye, then the other, and accept your fate with the calm resignation of someone who knows resistance is pointless. Night errands don't announce themselves loudly. They creep in softly, because whatever's needed is usually meant to stay quiet.
You ease yourself up again, moving with practiced care. Around you, bodies remain still, breathing deep and slow. You feel a small pang of envy, then let it go. Someone has to be awake, and tonight, it's you. Again. In the corridor, a familiar figure waits, another servant, slightly higher in rank, holding a folded scrap of parchment. No seal, no flourish. That tells you everything. This is not an official message. This is something that doesn't want witnesses. A mainstream historical fact settles into place as you follow them away from the sleeping quarters. Castles ran on communication, much of it informal. Messages passed quietly between rooms, floors, and people who technically weren't supposed to speak directly to one another. Servants were the connective tissue, trusted with secrets, simply because they were everywhere. You're handed the parchment, still warm from the hand that held it. You're told where to take it. No explanation. You don't ask.
Asking invites answers, and answers invite trouble. You walk. The castle at this hour feels different than earlier. Deeper, more inward. Torches burn lower now, flames steady and orange. Shadows cling more stubbornly to corners. You keep your steps light, listening as much as looking. Doors at night have personalities. Some sleep quietly. Others groan like they're offended you exist.
As you pass through a familiar corridor, you notice a door slightly ajar where it shouldn't be. You pause, heart giving a small, unnecessary flutter. You listen. Nothing. Probably nothing. Still, you push it gently closed, aligning latch with frame. Order restored. One less thing to worry about.
Here comes a quirky tidbit. In some households, servants were explicitly warned not to read messages they carried. But literacy among servants, especially in large, wealthy castles, was more common than people assume. Historians still argue how widespread servant literacy truly was, but you know enough to recognize words. You choose not to look. Curiosity is expensive. Your destination is a solar, tucked away behind a turn in the corridor, far from the main hall. You knock softly, a specific pattern you've been taught. The door opens just enough for the parchment to disappear into darkness. No face, no thanks. The door closes again, leaving you alone with the torchlight and your thoughts. You exhale slowly.
Your first light joke drifts through your mind. You imagine medieval castles invented read receipts, but only for messages you absolutely didn't want to acknowledge.
You turn back, only to be stopped by another quiet request. A different direction this time. A different task. You're asked to fetch a small object from storage. A box. Unremarkable, but kept under lock. You retrieve a key from a hook you know well, unlock the door, and lift the box carefully. It's heavier than it looks. Secrets usually are.
As you walk, you become acutely aware of being observed, or at least of the possibility. Not paranoia, just awareness. Night amplifies intention. Every sound feels like it matters more.
A fringe detail slips into your thoughts. Some medieval servants believed that carrying secrets physically, letters, objects, whispered messages, transferred responsibility, even guilt onto the carrier. Whether that belief was superstition or survival strategy, historians still argue. You just know your shoulders feel heavier. You deliver the box to a different door, a different knock. This time you catch a glimpse of a hand, ringed, pale, before the door closes. The box is gone. Your role is finished, for this task anyway. On your way back, you pause at a window slit again. Outside remains unchanged. Stars, fields, nothing dramatic. The world beyond the castle seems blissfully unaware of the quiet negotiations happening within these walls. Power moves softly at night.
Your second gentle joke surfaces. You think how modern spy movies would be very disappointed by how much espionage involves just walking carefully and not tripping. As you descend toward the lower levels, you encounter another servant coming up, eyes wide and alert. You exchange a look. No words. You both understand the language of being needed without context. You pass like ghosts, acknowledging one another.
A bell rings somewhere distant. Not urgent. Not for you. You keep moving. You've learned when to respond and when to let others handle it. That discernment is survival. Historians still argue how much servants knew about the politics swirling above them. Walking these corridors, carrying words and objects between unseen hands, you suspect the answer is more than they admitted, less than they wanted. Knowing too much makes sleep harder.
You finally return the key to its hook, aligning it just right so no one will notice it was ever moved. You pause, listening. The castle is settling again. The night deepens. Fewer footsteps now. Fewer whispers. Your third light joke arrives quietly. You consider that medieval networking is mostly just knowing which corridors creak less,
Back in the sleeping space, you lower yourself carefully, easing into your place. The warmth feels earned. Your mind, however, takes longer to settle. Images flicker. Doors, hands, boxes, words you didn't read. You let them pass. This isn't your story to hold on to.
Gradually, breathing around you steadies. The castle's hum softens. You allow yourself to drift again, comforted by the strange truth that even secrets have routines, and even power needs someone tired and ordinary to carry it through the dark.
By the time your eyes open again, the castle has shifted subtly. The air feels colder, though no doors are open. The faint scent of smoke lingers, mingling with straw, wax, and stone. You stretch lightly, careful not to disturb anyone nearby, because the sleeping quarters are still full. Some servants have shifted positions, some snore softly. Others are already quietly awake, stretching, or whispering to themselves. The night is at its midpoint, and the castle seems almost alive in its silent activity, even if most of its inhabitants appear motionless.
You rise and move toward the kitchens, the heart of nocturnal labor. Night is when pots are scrubbed, fires stoked, and leftover food prepared for the next day. The smell of stale bread and cooling meat greets you as you enter. A pot simmers quietly over a low fire, someone stirring its contents with meticulous care. You join in without words, adjusting the heat, stirring slowly, and keeping the rhythm of the night unbroken.
A mainstream historical fact drifts into your awareness. In many medieval castles, night work in the kitchen was routine, not punishment. Large households required maintenance at all hours, and food that wasn't prepared, cleaned, or preserved properly could spoil overnight, wasting both money and manpower. As you scrub a pan, your mind wanders to the quirks of medieval culinary labor. Some cooks used aromatic herbs not just for flavor, but as primitive insect deterrents, scattering sage or rosemary along counters and shelves. Historians still argue whether this practice was purely practical or tinged with superstition, but the smell is undeniable. You inhale lightly, appreciating the sharp tang in the otherwise quiet night. You carry buckets of water from the well, careful not to spill. The stone floor is slick, even with your careful steps. Every drop matters. Too little water and the fire sputters. Too much and someone will slip. Your hands ache slightly from the repeated lifting, but your body has grown accustomed to this rhythm. There's a certain meditative quality in the repetition, like counting breaths without actually counting. A quirky observation drifts into your consciousness. Kitchen labor often doubled as a form of security. Unattended fires or spills could be catastrophic. Maintaining vigilance while performing repetitive tasks keeps the mind sharp in a way that sleep never quite does. You imagine modern offices with fire drills every hour. The thought makes you smile faintly in the darkness. You check a row of prepared dishes, ensuring that nothing will attract unwanted attention from rodents or other intruders. Bread loaves are wrapped in cloth, meat stored carefully, and vegetables stacked neatly. A stray rat scuttles across a distant corner, and you shoo it silently. The nightly routine is partly about food preservation, partly about quiet pest control. Your first light joke surfaces. You think about how this is basically medieval Tetris, only instead of points, failure means angry nobles and more work tomorrow. Next, you move toward the wine and ale storage. Barrels line the walls, faintly echoing as you approach. You check that taps are closed, surfaces dry, and nothing leaks. Liquid is precious and messy in equal measure. A spill here would require hours of cleanup and a lecture later. You nudge one barrel with your shoulder, listening to the hollow sound. Solid. Everything is as it should be. A fringe detail pops into your thoughts. In some castles, barrels were occasionally tapped at night for small sips by favored staff, or the occasional noble too restless to wait until morning. Historians still argue whether this practice was common or exceptional, but you've witnessed it. You leave the barrels untouched.
knowing that discretion is more valuable than temptation. Carrying on, you assist a fellow servant in stacking firewood near the kitchen hearth. The logs are cold, rough, and heavy, but perfectly manageable in pairs. The physical work keeps you alert, a counterpoint to the monotony of stirring, scrubbing, and counting dishes. Repetition in motion has a rhythm of its own.
Your second gentle joke drifts in. You consider that modern gyms could learn a thing or two about functional fitness from medieval castle kitchens, moving firewood, carrying water, dodging rogue rats, all before sunrise. You pause near a small window, peering out into the courtyard. Moonlight illuminates the frost on the ground, giving it a silver sheen. Everything seems calm. Guards pace in predictable patterns. A distant owl calls. For a fleeting moment, the castle feels peaceful, a fragile bubble of order amid the potential chaos of darkness. Historians still argue whether this sense of order was perceived by all staff or primarily by those trained to enforce it. From your vantage point, walking the same stone paths, tending the same fires, and lifting the same buckets, order is both practical and psychological. It reminds everyone who moves through these corridors that the castle is alive, but under control. You finish your rounds by checking the back stairwell, ensuring that doors are secure and floors dry. Each corner inspected, each latch tested, brings a small, silent satisfaction. There is art in this quiet care, an almost meditative choreography of responsibility. Finally, you return to the lower sleeping quarters. The house has settled further into night. Your fellow servants stir occasionally, a rustle here, a shift there, but most are still deeply asleep. You slip back into your place, feeling the straw beneath you, cold yet familiar. The warmth of shared bodies is a constant comfort, a reminder that you are part of something larger. As you ease into a semblance of rest, you allow your thoughts to drift to the small victories of the night. No spills, no broken doors, no fires out of control. These mundane successes are significant here. The night continues, quiet but purposeful, and you finally feel the pull of sleep wrap around you, softer and slower than before. By now, the castle is settled into a steady nocturnal rhythm. The walls seem to exhale, stones cooling, fires breathing softly in hearths, and the distant shuffle of night watch footsteps marking time like a metronome. You stir again, partly awake, partly drawn forward by the expectation of tasks that never fully pause. Night is a living thing here, and even in the lower sleeping quarters, its pulse brushes against you, reminding you that your work is ongoing, even in the quiet hours. Your first movement is toward the larder, a space deep within the castle's walls where perishables are kept cool. The smell of stored meat and vegetables mingles with faint hints of preserved herbs and the ever-present odor of old stone. You carry a small lantern, its flame steady, throwing soft, flickering light onto barrels and shelves. Shadows bend and stretch across sacks of grain, and your hand instinctively adjusts a bundle that has shifted. Order is paramount here. Disarray invites pests, rot, and ultimately a host of complaints in the morning. A mainstream historical fact settles in as you move carefully among the provisions. Medieval larders were meticulously organized, often with seasonal rotation in mind. Fresh vegetables and fruits were used first, root crops later, and meats salted or smoked to extend shelf life. Servants were responsible for not only handling these items, but also tracking quantities and preventing waste. It was a job that demanded attention, patience, and a certain quiet vigilance that could feel endless. As you inspect a row of barrels, you notice a small shift in one of them. A few apples have rolled slightly out of alignment. You straighten them, listening to the faint thud of fruit against wood. There's a rhythm to this work, almost hypnotic, a combination of motion and quiet observation
that occupies your mind without taxing it. The night is long, but these small actions help pass the hours. You become attuned to the nuances of the space, the way shadows move, the faint draft from a nearby door, the smell of aging wine mingling with salted meat. Every sense contributes to your awareness.
A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some castles, servants would deliberately leave small treats or snacks tucked among the larder shelves for themselves, a tiny reward in the long hours of nighttime labor. Historians still argue whether these were tolerated, ignored, or outright punished if discovered, but the lore persists. You consider this briefly, smiling at the clever audacity it implies, and continue your work with renewed focus.
You move next to check the ice house or cold storage area. The temperature here is markedly lower, and your breath forms small clouds in the air. Here, preservation is literal. The chill extends the life of meat, fish, and sometimes butter. You run your hands along the stone shelves, noting any signs of melting or spoilage. The work is quiet, precise, and almost ritualistic.
Each item must be handled delicately, each container aligned perfectly, because mistakes here have consequences that ripple through the household the next day.
A mainstream fact comes to mind. Medieval cold storage methods varied widely depending on climate and wealth. Wealthy castles often had dedicated ice houses, insulated with straw and filled with ice harvested from nearby ponds during winter. These allowed food to last longer, giving the household flexibility in meal planning and reducing waste. Your care ensures that this system functions smoothly, even while the castle sleeps. As you adjust a tub of salted fish, you notice the faint metallic scent of brine mingling with the stone-cold air. You inhale slowly, letting the familiarity of these smells anchor you. They remind you that you are not alone, that generations of servants have walked these same halls, lifted the same barrels, and endured the same quiet, persistent rhythm of the night. There is comfort in this continuity, even when your body protests against the long hours and repetitive motion. Your first light joke of the section surfaces. You consider that modern kitchens could never compete with the medieval larder in terms of ambiance. Cold, shadowed, and smelling of salted fish. Truly immersive interior design.
Next, you check the flour sacks and grain bins, tapping them gently to assess their condition. Mice and other pests are a constant threat, so you ensure that each sack is intact and positioned to minimize access. You adjust cloth coverings where needed, tying them securely with knots that have become second nature. This work, while simple, requires focus and care. Even minor lapses can result in ruined meals or angry supervisors in the morning.
A fringe detail pops into your thoughts. In some medieval households, it was common to mix small amounts of chili, pepper, or other strong spices into grain storage as a rudimentary pest deterrent. Historians still argue how effective these methods were, but the practice reflects a creative, if not entirely reliable, approach to household management. You chuckle quietly to yourself, imagining a mouse with a particularly adventurous palate.
You move toward the back stairs, carrying a small basket of herbs harvested earlier in the evening. These will be distributed to various rooms in the castle, used for both cooking and medicinal purposes. Each bundle is carefully arranged, tied with string, and labeled where possible. The night is your canvas, and your hands are instruments maintaining balance and order in the household ecosystem.
Your second gentle joke drifts in. You consider that modern aromatherapy pales in comparison to a hallway lined with rosemary, thyme, and sage, each scent mingling unpredictably with the stone and smoke.
Finally, you pause at a small window overlooking the courtyard. Moonlight spills across the cobblestones, silvering the frost and casting long shadows. You take a moment to breathe, appreciating the stillness of the night. Guards patrol steadily, fires flicker faintly in distant towers, and the castle hums its quiet nocturnal tune.
For all the labor and vigilance, there is beauty here if one looks closely enough.
Historians still argue how much the aesthetic of the castle influenced its daily operations versus the purely practical concerns of defense and efficiency. Standing here, you sense both, the harmony of shadows, stone, and work, coexisting with the harsh necessities that govern every action.
You return to the sleeping quarters briefly, checking on the few servants still awake, ensuring that those tending fires or keeping watch are settled. Their expressions are weary but steady, a reflection of the quiet endurance that defines life in this place. You slip back to your own pallet, curling among the straw and shared warmth, allowing your body to relax while remaining alert enough to respond if the night demands it.
Your third light joke surfaces lazily. You imagine explaining this work to someone expecting dragons, banquets, and jousting. No, mostly it's just moving salted fish, tying herbs, and checking flour sacks at 2 a.m.
Finally, you let yourself sink into the half-light, half-dark, half-sleep, half-awareness state that the castle seems to induce naturally. You know you will rise again for another round of tasks, but for now, the rhythm slows. The cold stone, the scent of straw and herbs, the soft whisper of the night, these are your companions. The castle breathes with you, and for this brief interlude, all is as it should be.
You awaken once more to the soft, uneven light of a torch that someone, perhaps a more conscientious night shift servant, has left burning low in the corridor. Your body protests slightly, joints stiff and fingers sore from the repeated movements of the past hours, but you rise without hesitation. By now, your muscles have memorized the castle's rhythm, the silent cues, the low hum of stones settling in the cold night air. Even in exhaustion, you are alert. Night labor has a way of tuning every sense to the castle's subtle language.
Your first task is to check the armory. Though it's late, security never sleeps, and weapons must always be accounted for. You take the narrow stair that leads to the lower levels, careful not to bump the torch against the wall. The smell of iron and oil greets you as you push open the heavy door. Rows of spears, halberds, and swords glint faintly in the torchlight, their tips catching it like small stars. Racks are orderly, polished, and silent, as if they too are waiting for something that never comes.
A mainstream historical fact settles in. Medieval armories were not only repositories of weaponry, but also vital points of trust. Servants assigned here were often chosen for reliability. Losing track of a sword or a pike could have consequences beyond a mere scolding. Weapons had both practical and symbolic significance, representing the household's power and readiness for conflict. Your eyes sweep the racks, noting every spear and blade, confirming that all are in place.
You run your hands lightly over the hilts, adjusting anything slightly misaligned. The process is repetitive, almost hypnotic, but your attention sharpens with each movement. You listen to the echo of your steps in the stone room and hear the subtle creak of a door outside. It could be a guard. It could be nothing. Regardless, you remain silent, moving like a shadow. This is your role in the quiet, secretive ballet of castle maintenance.
A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. In some castles, armory attendants would secretly test the balance of swords and the tautness of bowstrings at night, long after the nobles had gone to bed. Historians still argue whether this was standard practice or an occasional indulgence of meticulous servants, but you can imagine generations of hands honing weapons quietly, as though sleep were an afterthought. You move a few blades slightly, feeling their weight, nodding to yourself in appreciation of centuries of care.
Next, you check the armor racks. Breastplates, helmets, and gauntlets are meticulously arranged. The smell of polished metal mingles with the faint must of worn leather. You adjust a helmet slightly tilted on its stand. You pause for a moment to run your fingers along the edges, remembering stories of armor being used ceremonially as much as practically. Some helmets bore engraved crests, others were plain. Your touch is careful. These are silent guardians, waiting to be worn if the castle should ever need them.
Your first light joke drifts into your mind. You think about how a modern minimalist would likely faint at this much iron and leather. Yet here, every piece has its place, purpose, and history. Efficiency meets aesthetics in a way no IKEA shelf ever could. You move to check the racks of smaller weapons, daggers, axes, maces. Each item is accounted for, clean, and sharp enough to be ready at a moment's notice. Even a tiny dagger has a story here, and you treat it accordingly. You note one particularly crooked blade, likely used more for chopping firewood than battle, and give it a gentle nudge into proper alignment. Someone centuries ago would nod approvingly.
A fringe detail surfaces. Some servants believed that weapons absorbed the energy of their wielders, and that handling them improperly at night could invite misfortune or accidents. Historians still argue whether these superstitions had practical roots or were purely imaginative, but you find the thought comforting. Caution never hurts, even if the danger is mostly imagined. After ensuring all is in order, you move toward the weapons chest, testing the lock. It slides smoothly into place. You imagine the chain of hands that have done this before you. Key turned, latch tested, chest closed. Continuity matters. The castle depends on it, even if it is invisible to the nobility sleeping above.
As you leave the armory, you pause briefly at a small window slit. Outside, the moon glimmers against frost-kissed courtyards. The guards move steadily along the walls, their footsteps echoing softly. There is a quiet order to all this, a sense of invisible lines being maintained. You inhale, letting the chill seep into your lungs, the cold sharpening your focus after hours of repetitive tasks.
You descend to the kitchen again, this time to check on the ovens and the fire pits. Heat has diminished, but embers glow faintly. Someone will stoke these before dawn, but a vigilant servant ensures no fire dies too low, risking smoke damage or extinguished warmth. You poke gently at the coals, spreading them for even heat. Flames flare briefly, sending shadows dancing across the stone walls, then settle back into a steady glow. The rhythm is comforting. Your second gentle joke surfaces. You imagine fire safety inspectors from the future fainting at the notion of an open flame, unsupervised, in a massive stone structure with hundreds of people sleeping nearby.
Next, you check the stew pots, ensuring that nothing has boiled dry or gone off overnight. Herbs are added quietly where needed, adjusting flavors for the morning meal. The kitchen smells stronger now, a mix of cooking fat, herbs, and smoke, a scent that is as familiar to you as the sound of footsteps on the corridor stones. Night labor has its own olfactory signature, and you recognize it instantly.
You pause briefly at a spice rack. Pepper, cloves, cinnamon, reminders that luxury is not absent here, even in the humblest corners. These spices will be used sparingly in the morning, a reminder of the household's wealth. Handling them now, you marvel at the journey each has taken from distant lands, arriving here to be measured, ground, and sprinkled over food that will sustain dozens of people. Historians still argue how common such imported spices truly were in the average castle versus elite households, but in this castle, they are tangible. You breathe their scent, letting it anchor you in a sense of place and continuity. Finally, you make a slow round of the hallways, checking doors that lead to storerooms, sleeping quarters, and other lower-level rooms. Each door is latched, each latch tested. The castle seems to respond to your touch, sturdy and firm, yet intimate in its familiarity. You move quietly, deliberately, aware that even the softest creak might wake someone or disturb the delicate peace of night. Your third light joke drifts lazily into your mind. You consider that being a medieval knight servant is essentially being a professional ghost, seen only when necessary, present always, but otherwise invisible. You smile faintly,
letting the warmth of humor lighten the chill of stone and shadows.
Satisfied that all is secure, you return to the sleeping quarters. The others are mostly still in slumber, the occasional murmur or movement betraying restless dreams. You ease back into your straw pallet, careful not to disturb anyone, and allow your body to relax. The armory is quiet, the kitchen stable, the castle itself calm. Your vigilance has maintained a fragile equilibrium, unnoticed but essential.
Sleep begins to reclaim you slowly, pulling you into a lighter, steadier rhythm. The castle hums softly, an unspoken lullaby of stone and fire, carrying you gently deeper into the night's embrace. Your hands are idle now, but your mind remains aware, resting in the knowledge that the castle is safe for the moment, and that the night continues to move with quiet, patient precision.
By the time you stir this time, the castle is whispering in a different way. The air is colder again, carrying faint drafts from arrow slits and open windows. Yet there's a calm in the chill. Your body aches slightly from repeated rising, bending, lifting, and walking, but your muscles have adapted. They move almost automatically now, each step, each motion embedded in memory.
You know where the stone creaks, which doors hang slightly off their frames, and which torches burn low and need gentle adjustment.
You slip quietly from the sleeping quarters, boots soft on the stone floor. The corridors are dark but familiar. Shadows twist in the flickering light from torches, but your eyes have adjusted. You recognize every corner and niche, every nook where someone might trip or where a draft might gather. This is intimate knowledge, earned over many nights, and it feels almost sacred. The castle is a living organism, and you are part of its pulse.
Tonight, your path leads you to the chapel, a small, austere room tucked away in one corner of the castle. Even at night, some households kept candles burning here, both for spiritual reasons and to ward off unwanted creatures drawn to darkness. You push open the wooden door with care. The smell of old wood, candle wax, and faint incense greets you. The chapel is quiet, save for the subtle creak of the floorboards beneath your feet.
Medieval castles often included chapels, not only for the nobility's private devotion, but also as a space accessible to servants. While formal participation varied, night visits for prayer, reflection, or lighting candles were part of life in devout households. You step lightly toward a small altar, adjusting a candle that has begun to tilt.
The flame steadies, and the shadows fall in familiar patterns across the stone walls, forming shapes that feel both protective and watchful.
As you arrange the candle, a quirky detail drifts through your thoughts. Some servants believed that lighting a candle at night would not only bring spiritual comfort, but also shield them from mischievous spirits or bad luck. Historians still argue whether this practice was superstition, personal faith, or a blend of both, but the soft glow in the chapel is undeniably comforting. You inhale the faint scent of beeswax and incense, letting it anchor you in the moment.
From here, your attention shifts to tidying the benches and kneelers. Dust has settled in the corners, and a stray feather from earlier activity flutters in the torchlight. You brush it aside, careful not to disturb the careful arrangement of the chapel. Repetition and order are your allies tonight. Every movement counts. Every adjustment matters, no matter how small. The castle rewards meticulousness.
Your first gentle joke drifts in. You imagine explaining to a visitor that your nightly spiritual duties involve equal parts cleaning, rearranging, and low-key torch management. Holy work meets housekeeping. The thought brings a faint smile.
Once the chapel is in order, you move toward a storage room nearby, filled with textiles, linens, and spare vestments. You check that folded cloths remain neat, adjusting anything that is shifted. The texture of fabric is soft beneath your fingertips, a contrast to the cold stone and rigid metal you handled earlier. There's a quiet satisfaction in aligning folds,
in creating visual harmony. Attention to detail is comforting, almost meditative, in the depths of night. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some castles maintained separate linens for different purposes: dining, sleeping, religious ceremonies, and emergencies. Servants were expected to know these distinctions and to deploy the correct cloths without error. Historians still argue how strictly these divisions were enforced, but handling these textiles carefully teaches a certain patience, a respect for the household's order.
From the storage room, you make a loop toward the Lord's Solar, the private chamber where the castle's master sleeps. Night duty here is not about intrusion, but maintenance. You adjust a curtain slightly, close a shutter against the cold night air, and ensure that nothing in the room has fallen out of place. The quiet confidence of order hums in your veins. Small, unnoticed gestures like these prevent problems later, often before anyone realizes they existed.
Servants were responsible for maintaining private quarters at night, checking warmth, light, and security. Though these tasks seem minor, they contributed to household efficiency and comfort. Night labor was invisible, yet essential. You move with care, leaving nothing out of alignment.
Your second light joke drifts in. You imagine medieval interior decorators would be horrified if they saw the chaos you prevent nightly, but your small interventions keep the illusion of perfection alive.
Finally, you pause near a window overlooking the inner courtyard. The moon has shifted, silvering frost and stone in a slightly different pattern. Guards walk along the battlements, horses shift in their stalls, and distant chimneys exhale thin smoke trails into the night sky. You inhale the cold, letting the rhythm of the castle settle around you. There is peace here, structured and purposeful, if fleeting.
Historians still debate how aware servants were of the larger political or social currents in the household, but you sense that your small interventions, lighting candles, aligning fabric, adjusting shutters, are as influential as any grand decision made by those above. The night is a stage, and every silent movement contributes to the ongoing narrative of the castle.
You return to the lower levels with a sense of quiet satisfaction, each step measured and soft. Your body relaxes gradually as you re-enter the sleeping quarters, though vigilance never fully leaves you. The warmth of shared straw and bodies welcomes you back. You slip in quietly, careful not to disturb anyone, and feel yourself sinking into the heavy, comforting rhythm of near sleep.
Your third light joke surfaces lazily. You imagine future historians reading about the glamorous life of castle servants and sighing, unaware that the real work was candle lighting, curtain adjusting, and quiet observation at 3 a.m. Finally, you allow your thoughts to drift to the castle around you, to the quiet efficiency of the night, and to the comforting knowledge that, for now, every task is complete, every space maintained. Sleep draws you gently back, wrapped in straw, warmth, and the silent, patient heartbeat of the castle. The castle feels almost entirely still when you awaken this time, yet you know better than to assume true rest. Even in the deepest hours of night, the walls breathe softly, carrying echoes of distant footsteps, faint creaks, and whispers that belong to shadows. You rise slowly, stretching carefully, muscles stiff from repeated rounds of labor and sleep that never feels quite long enough. Your body has become attuned to this nocturnal life, aware, alert, yet capable of moving automatically, responding to the castle's subtle cues without conscious thought.
Tonight, your steps lead you toward the storage rooms beneath the Great Hall. These are the places where the household's reserves are kept: barrels of wine, baskets of vegetables, sacks of grain, and crates of preserved meat. The air here is cool and smells faintly sweet with stored fruits, tangy with fermentation, and earthy with vegetables. Every item has its place, and your role is to ensure that nothing has shifted dangerously overnight. You carry a lantern, its flame steady, casting a warm glow across the stacked provisions. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Medieval castle storage was meticulously organized to prevent spoilage, theft, or accidents. Servants were responsible for checking weights, quantities, and general condition of supplies, often performing these duties at night when fewer people were moving through the corridors. Your careful attention helps the household run smoothly, though your labor goes largely unnoticed by those who benefit most from it. As you move along the rows of barrels, you notice one has shifted slightly. You kneel to adjust it, listening to the faint thud of wood against stone. It's a repetitive motion, almost hypnotic. In the quiet, you focus on the tactile sensations, the rough wood of the barrel, the smooth curve of metal hoops, the cool, uneven floor beneath your knees. Every sense is engaged. The night is long, and these small tasks occupy both your body and mind.
A quirky tidbit flits through your thoughts. In some castles, servants were known to leave tiny notes or small tokens inside barrels or storage spaces as markers for others, sort of an early form of secret messages that were only meaningful to insiders. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, but the thought makes the night feel slightly playful, even in its stillness. You smile faintly, imagining centuries of quiet communication hidden in mundane chores. Next, you move toward the cellar where ale and wine are kept. You inspect the barrels, tapping gently to ensure they're sealed, checking the taps, and making sure no leaks have formed. A faint smell of fermenting grain drifts toward you. You inhale it, savoring the sensory detail. It's a smell associated with care, with history, with nights like this repeated countless times by countless hands. Each barrel is a small responsibility, and each responsibility matters. Your first light joke surfaces. You think about how modern breweries would consider this rigorous quality control, but here it's just a part of surviving the night. No accolades, no thanks, just careful attention. That, somehow, makes it feel almost noble. You pause near a window slit overlooking the courtyard. Moonlight reflects off frost-covered stones and illuminates distant trees. Guards move in steady pattern below, their steps echoing softly. The world outside seems serene, unaware of the meticulous work taking place within these walls. The contrast between the calm night and your quiet labor is almost poetic, a balance of stillness and motion. Historians still argue whether medieval servants had a sense of the larger rhythms of the household, or if their perspective was limited to immediate tasks. Standing here, observing the courtyard while adjusting barrels, you feel that your awareness straddles both. You are at once focused on the micro, each barrel, each crate, and vaguely aware of the macro, the flow of activity across the castle, the lives unfolding above and below you. You continue through the cellar, checking sacks of grain and flour. Small disturbances catch your attention. A corner lifted by a draft, a loose knot in a cloth covering. You adjust everything meticulously. The repetitive nature of the work lulls your mind into a meditative rhythm. There is satisfaction in doing what must be done, in aligning items so perfectly that the castle itself seems to approve. Night labor, you realize, is an art form as much as it is a duty. A fringe tidbit emerges. Some servants believed that certain storerooms had spirits or guardian entities that watched over supplies, rewarding careful stewardship and punishing negligence. Whether superstition or psychological aid, it reinforces your attention to detail. Every movement feels deliberate, respectful, and slightly ceremonial.
Once the storerooms are secure, you move upstairs to check minor details in the corridors leading to the Great Hall. Torches are checked, brackets adjusted, and shadows observed. Even small misalignments could lead to accidents, and you move carefully to prevent any mishaps. The castle seems to respond to your presence, quiet and cooperative, the stone cold but familiar. Your second gentle joke drifts in. You imagine modern interior designers trying to understand your nighttime duties and insisting it counts as extreme multitasking. You smirk at the thought, returning to the rhythm of light steps and careful adjustments.
Finally, you return to the sleeping quarters, aware that dawn is approaching. Your fellow servants are mostly still asleep, murmuring softly, a few shifting in response to the cold. You ease back into your pallet, feet brushing against straw, body sinking into shared warmth. The night's labor has passed in a series of small, exacting motions, yet each motion mattered. You allow your mind to drift, letting the quiet satisfaction of completed tasks fill the spaces between breath and heartbeat.
Your third light joke surfaces lazily. You imagine telling someone that a night in the castle involves barrels, torches, and frozen courtyards, not dragons, feasts, or dramatic battles. They would probably be disappointed. You close your eyes, letting the repetition of motion and responsibility dissolve into the soft rhythm of sleep.
Outside, the first hints of dawn touch the courtyard, casting the castle in muted gold. Inside, the sleeping servants remain in their warm nests of straw and blankets, carrying dreams of the night and the subtle awareness of another day to come. You sink fully into rest, wrapped in comfort, rhythm, and the steady heartbeat of the castle you have tended so carefully.
The first rays of pale sunlight begin to filter into the castle, brushing across frost-kissed stones and warming the edges of torches that have long burned low. You stir once more, feeling the weight of night work in your limbs, but also the quiet satisfaction of having kept everything in order. The castle is alive around you in new ways. Birds stir in the courtyard, distant kitchens begin to smoke, and the faint clatter of waking servants reaches you like a gentle tide. Night is ending, but your role has been vital. You rise, stretching slowly, letting your muscles loosen in preparation for the final rounds before the household fully awakens. Even at this hour, the castle is demanding, though the urgency has softened. Your first stop is the Great Hall, where tables and benches await the day's meals. Crumbs, spilled drinks, or displaced chairs from the previous evening are corrected swiftly, your movements fluid and silent. You arrange candles for breakfast light, ensuring they stand straight and are trimmed evenly. Attention to such details is uncelebrated but essential. The nobles will never know, but the hall's sense of order reflects directly on your work.
A mainstream historical fact anchors your morning. In medieval castles, the first hours of daylight were used for preparation. Servants adjusted bedding, tidied halls, and prepared kitchens to meet the demands of early rising nobles. This system of rotation, early labor, and anticipatory work ensured that daily life flowed smoothly. You, in your quiet dedication, are the unseen linchpin of this rhythm. Next, you move toward the outer walls, checking gates and ensuring that the courtyard is secure. Horses are stable-bound, guards finishing their final rounds before the shift change. You nod at familiar faces, sharing silent acknowledgement. There's a bond here, quiet but enduring. Night labor is often invisible, yet it connects everyone who walks the stone corridors at odd hours.
A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some castles, early morning rounds included small ritualistic gestures to the stables, tapping a post, whispering a soft blessing, or ensuring feed was aligned just so. Historians still argue whether this was practical, superstitious, or a combination of both, but you follow the patterns instinctively, passing the routine on to the castle itself.
From the courtyard, you enter the servants' quarters to check one final detail: bedding and blankets. You adjust, fold, or replace where necessary, smoothing straw and ensuring warmth remains intact. Sleep is precious. Your hands, almost automatically, create comfort for those who have endured the night's demands. Even the smallest details, the alignment of a pillow, the position of a blanket, matter here. A light joke drifts lazily into your thoughts. You imagine the nobles imagining glamorous mornings in their castle, while in reality, you've just spent half the night arranging straw and whispering to barrels of ale. Someone ought to write a guide, Castle Life for the Unseen.
Next, you make a slow loop through the kitchen, checking the fire, reviewing leftover pots, and ensuring everything is in readiness for breakfast. Herbs are arranged neatly, utensils aligned, and the scent of lingering night work mingles with fresh air sneaking through small openings. Your hands glide over surfaces with a rhythm developed over countless nights. Each adjustment is small but cumulative, maintaining the delicate balance of order and readiness.
A fringe detail surfaces. Some household manuals instructed servants to lightly stir lingering soups or stews to prevent separation or burning, even in the dead of night. Historians still argue how strictly these methods were followed, but you know that subtle care preserves the integrity of food and prevents complaints in the morning. Each pot you touch is a quiet act of guardianship, ensuring that the day starts without disruption. You pause briefly near a window overlooking the courtyard, inhaling the crisp morning air. Light spreads across frost-lined stones and towers, transforming cold and shadow into warm gold. Guards and stable hands are already moving, marking the shift from night to day. You allow yourself a moment of stillness, letting the castle's gradual awakening settle around you. There's pride here, quiet and unspoken, for you have guided this transition seamlessly. Your second light joke surfaces. You think about how night shift here isn't just a job, it's an invisible choreography, a dance performed with torches, barrels, and blankets, rather than music or applause.
Finally, you return to your own resting area one last time. You sink into straw, feeling the residual warmth of the night and the promise of a day soon to begin. Your body relaxes fully, bones and muscles thankful for pause. The castle continues to breathe around you, slower now, gentler, welcoming the morning while respecting the work you've done. You allow yourself to drift, carrying with you the quiet pride of a night well tended, a castle secure, and routines maintained.
The light grows gently, filtering in through narrow windows, softening the angles of stone and wood. The castle breathes a slow, steady rhythm, releasing the tension of night labor. You feel your own heartbeat soften, the pulse of vigilance giving way to rest. Sleep seeps back into your limbs, not abruptly, but like a quiet stream easing into a calm pool. The air smells faintly of straw, herbs, and wood smoke, carrying the subtle reassurance that everything is as it should be.
You reflect on the night's work, barrels aligned, torches steady, fires managed, linens folded, and the castle itself kept in balance. The small motions, almost invisible to the untrained eye, have carried the household through darkness. There's comfort in this knowledge, a quiet pride that doesn't require recognition. Even as dawn spreads, the memory of your efforts lingers like a gentle hum.
Outside, birds begin their morning song, carrying light and warmth over stone walls and frost-kissed courtyards. Inside, the castle settles into the rhythm of day. Guards patrol more briskly, servants begin to stir in earnest, and the nobility prepare to awaken, unaware of the labor that made their morning seamless. You remain cocooned in straw and blankets, letting the hum of life continue without you for a moment longer.
Now your mind drifts softly, following the gentle cadence of the castle. Each breath expands and contracts, each exhale releasing tension, each inhale welcoming calm. The night has ended, and your body responds with gratitude. Comfort, warmth, and quiet order wrap around you like a familiar cloak. And with that, you surrender fully to the slow, restorative embrace of sleep, carried by the castle's heartbeat and the knowledge that the world is safe, the household ready, and all is at peace. End of script. Sweet dreams.